You know, when I say the words serial killer, a very specific image probably pops into your head. But what if that image, the one we've all seen in movies and headlines, is dangerously incomplete? It's an image that usually starts with something just like this.
This right here. This message, scrawled in lipstick at a crime scene way back in 1945. It's just the perfect example, isn't it? It's desperate, it's taunting, it's almost theatrical. This note from William Hirons is the classic archetype we all expect, the male predator totally driven by some uncontrollable psychological demon.
Okay, so before we dive in any deeper, we gotta make sure we're all on the same page with the lingo. As you can see, what separates these different types of killers really just comes down to timing, and for a serial killer, that key ingredient is the cooling off period. That's the time in between the crimes when they just go back to their seemingly normal life.
And that, of course, leads us to the biggest question of all, the one that has haunted criminologists for decades. Are these killers born evil or are they made?
It's the age-old nature versus nurture debate, right? But when you're talking about serial offenders, the research points overwhelmingly in one direction. The vast majority of them are survivors of some kind of profound early childhood trauma. We're talking physical or sexual abuse, just severe family dysfunction. It's this grim, recurring theme you see again and again.
So how do investigators take that knowledge and actually use it in an active case? Well, let's open up the Profiler's Playbook and look at the classic framework the FBI developed to get inside the mind of their unknown subject.
Now, what's so fascinating here is how this framework turns a crime scene into a psychological blueprint. On one hand, you've got your organized killer. He's intelligent, he's methodical, he plans everything, stalks a stranger, and leaves a controlled crime scene with very little evidence. Think Ted Bundy. Then you have the total opposite, the disorganized killer. Impulsive, socially awkward, probably attacks someone they know in a messy, spontaneous way. This is how profilers start to build a picture of who they're hunting for.
And it's a powerful tool, no doubt about it. But it was built by studying a very specific type of offender. So you have to ask, does this classic male-centric model really tell the whole story? The data says, not even close. In the United States, women make up less than 8% of all known serial killers. And because there's such a statistical anomaly, the tools and the tropes we use to get our heads around this crime, they often miss them completely.
And this, right here, is where our popular understanding needs a major update. We're going to focus on this overlooked offender, the female serial killer, who for far too long has just been treated like a statistical blip.
I mean, listen to this quote. It shows you just how deep this bias goes. This is from Ann Rule, one of the most famous true crime writers ever, testifying before the U.S. Senate. Even an expert who literally knew Ted Bundy defaulted to the male pronoun. It just shows you how baked in this assumption really is.
Because the thing is, when we actually do look closer, what we find is that the motives and the methods of female killers are often fundamentally different from the men we're so used to hearing about.
Just look at this breakdown. On the left, you've got your classic male typologies. They're often driven by these big abstract things, psychotic breaks, a mission, or just pure fantasies of power and lust. But then you look to the right, the female typologies, they're often way more practical, more relational. They're killing for profit, or within a caregiver role, or for revenge against specific people. The why is a completely different ballgame.
So let's zoom in on the angel of death. This killer operates in a place where death isn't a surprise, like a hospital. They get off on that godlike power of deciding who lives and who dies. A truly chilling example is Janine Jones, a nurse who would inject children with heart-stopping drugs. Sometimes she'd revive them just to be called a hero, and sometimes not. She's thought to be responsible for the deaths of more than 60 infants.
Or take the Black Widow. This is a killer who systematically murders spouses, partners, even family members, for money. Poison is often their go-to weapon. Belle Gunnis, for example, had a farm outside Chicago where she murdered as many as 49 people. Husbands, suitors, even her own kids, all for their insurance money and assets. This isn't about some dark compulsion. This is cold, calculated business.
So if these killers exist, why don't we see them as clearly? This quote from Toni Morrison gives us a clue. The male serial killer, he's become a kind of comfortable evil, a familiar story that maybe keeps us from seeing a truth that we find even more unbearable.
So for this last part, we're going to explore exactly how our culture creates this comfortable evil. Drawing from a thesis by Melinda Page Wilkins, we're going to see how the stories we tell about female killers actually say a lot more about us than they do about them.
It all starts with language. Male killers get these monstrous, terrifying names, the Night Stalker. But when Aileen Wuornos was caught, what did the media call her? The Damsel of Death. It's trivializing. The name itself diminishes her and makes her seem less threatening, less real.
And that points to this bigger cultural reflex we have. When a woman commits a truly horrible crime, our first instinct is often to deny her agency. We search for a reason. With Aileen Wuornos, her horrific backstory of abuse became the entire story. The movie Monster framed her not as a predator, but as a tragic victim herself.
But there's one huge exception where we judge female violence far more harshly, when it violates that sacred role of mother or caregiver. The public outrage over Susan Smith, the woman who drowned her own children, was immediate and absolute. We find it almost impossible to square the image of a nurturing mother with the act of a cold-blooded killer.
And here's the bottom line. Our society has this massive moral and material investment in the idea of women as inherently nurturing caregivers. So a woman who is a predator, who kills for profit or power, she shatters that stereotype so completely that it becomes a story we can't or maybe won't tell clearly. Which leaves us with one final provocative question to think about. If we keep forcing female killers into these two simple boxes, the tragic victim or the unnatural monster, what complex, uncomfortable truths about violence, agency, and gender are we choosing to leave in the dark? The answer might just lie in that idea of a comfortable evil, the familiar story that keeps us from knowing what we simply cannot bear to know.